Killer selfie. Okay, there's something weird going on. I don't want to tell my friends or family, they'd probably just make fun of me for being scared. I have to post this somewhere though, because if something does happen to me, then I want there to be someone who knows. It started with these selfies appearing on my phone. Haha, right, so you accidentally clicked the camera button when you weren't looking. That's what I thought at first too, until I found a photo of me sleeping, taken from across the room. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. I charge my phone overnight on the night table beside my bed. There's no reason the phone should have been across the room from me in the first place. I deleted the photo as soon as I found it. I just felt weird having it on my phone. The next night, there was another one, this time it was taken by someone standing right over my bed. After that, it started getting even weirder. I found a couple of photos of myself at Universal Studios, and you guessed it, I've never been there. It showed me hanging out with my friend David. We were on rides together, eating ice cream, getting photos with the giant Transformer robots. It actually looked like a lot of fun. That's when I decided he must be playing a trick on me. I don't know how he was getting the pictures on my phone, but he was obviously photoshopping just to screw with me. 2 days later, David actually did invite me to Universal. It was a relief because I figured this is where he would finally come clean about what was going on. Of course he denied it, but that was all part of the joke. Or at least that's what I thought, until another photo appeared while we were hanging out. My face looked so surprised as a man behind me forced his switchblade between my ribs. I freaked. I just went straight home and stayed in my room for the rest of the day. I broke my phone by slamming it in my desk drawer over and over until it wouldn't turn on. The next day I went to the ATT store for a new phone. I said the last one was stolen, and they gave me an insurance replacement one. Brand new, straight out of the package, it didn't even have a SIM card in it yet. But the moment I opened it, I saw a photo of myself saved as the wallpaper. Only I didn't look like I usually do. My eyes were sunken like I haven't slept in days. My clothes were caked with dirt and blood, and there were open sores on my skin. The photos are appearing several times a day now. Some depict me getting hit by a car, or sitting in a bathtub in a pool of my own blood. I got one the other day where I was stretched out on a laboratory table, shackled into place. I'm afraid to destroy my phone again. I decided it might be trying to warn me, and if something is going to happen, I need to know about it so I can be ready. I haven't left my apartment in almost a week now. The last photo to appear showed me hanging by the neck from my ceiling fan. I don't want to do it, but if it does happen I just want people to know. It wasn't me who did it. Something did it to me. Next story. Unborn doll. My family didn't want me to keep the baby. I could tell from the moment I told them the happy news. My father just sat there with a look of blank shock, while my mother wasted no time in trying to console me. Console me? Why would I need to be consoled? It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It didn't stop there either. First were the pamphlets from a clinic that was supposed to take care of it. Who but a gangster would use take care of it as a euphemism for murder? It got worse when I learned the baby wasn't going to be entirely normal. The subtle hints and worried glances turned into outright accusation. Like there was something wrong with me just because I would continue to love my baby even if it wasn't like all the others. I knew I couldn't live with people who were so hell-bent on destroying my daughter. Yes, it was going to be a girl with beautiful blonde hair and blue eyes. You may think I'm overreacting, but one night they actually tried to force me into a mental ward so they could declare I was unfit to make my own medical decisions. The baby's father wasn't in the picture, don't get me started on him, so I had to be on my own after that. But it was okay, because I was going to have a beautiful baby girl, and we'd be there for each other even when the whole world turned their back on us. The delivery was easier than I expected because she was very small. The doctors wanted to keep her there, but I knew she would be better off with me. As soon as I looked into her brilliant blue eyes, I knew everything was going to be okay. The hair wasn't all there, but I just had to get a little pink dress for her and she looked as beautiful as a porcelain doll. I don't know what my parents were so worried about. Being stillborn makes her even easier to take care of. She never eats, never makes a mess, and never makes a fuss when I dress her up. I have to apply makeup and a bit of perfume to cover up the rotting bits, but there's nothing I wouldn't do for my little girl. The only thing that bothers me, and this is going to be true of any new baby, is when she cries in the night. She's doing it now, but it's honestly okay. I think I'm just going to sew her mouth shut in the morning. Next story. Confessions of a Serial Killer. This letter is from a confessed serial killer to his 13-year-old daughter. Dear Samantha, I'm sorry I haven't been around for a while, but you're going to have to be strong, just like I'm trying to be strong for you. I don't know how much your mother has told you, but sooner or later you're going to hear about what Daddy did, and I want to tell you why I did it. They're going to tell you I killed those 7 kids. That I tortured them first, chaining them in that shed in the woods. You remember the place, you used to build a fort there and play princess of the castle. You'll always be my princess, even after everything that has happened there. You're going to hear about how the victims were starved and forced to eat the one who came before them, and how they'd be chained up until the next one came round to eat them up too. You're going to see my name brought up on websites and social media. Photos of the murders are going to be uploaded, and you're going to have to see those corpses stripped of flesh and put on display for the whole world to see. You're going to hear priests condemning me to hell, and news stations using my name as propaganda for whatever self-serving platform they can find. And worst of all, you're going to be feared because of your association with me. But you have your whole life ahead of you, and no matter how bad it seems now, this is not your defining moment. These weeks or months until everyone forgets won't last forever. These killings will not determine who you are. I won't be coming home again, but someday after years have stretched this memory thin, it's going to be like none of this has ever happened. That's why I did it. That's why I confessed, so you could move on and forget. That's why I never told the police that you were the one who led them into the woods. That's why I turned myself in as soon as I found the bodies. I don't care how many of them you got, there's only one person I care about protecting, and that's you, my princess. If this is what you want, then you should have it. You deserve everything in this world. I know you told me that you weren't going to stop leading people into the woods, but at least try to be more careful next time. Don't take kids, don't take anyone they're going to look for. And when I'm gone, I hope you find someone who loves you as much as your daddy does. I hope they love you so much, they confess for you and you can keep playing forever. Don't ever stop playing, princess. The world is yours. Love, Daddy. My name is Detective Matthews. I was lead on the Killer Miller serial murder case. This letter was confiscated after an inmate tried to smuggle it out of the visitation room. Samantha Miller is currently missing, last seen in Los Angeles County. The station is offering a reward to anyone who can provide information regarding her whereabouts. Samantha is considered to be a danger to herself and others. If you have any information, please call this number and ask for Mr. Matthews. Next story. The final question. There are lots of stories about how people die. Death is very intriguing, because it is something everyone will experience, and yet no one has ever experienced, because as soon as you have undergone death, there is no more you to have experiences at all. But this isn't the story of just anyone's death. This is the story of how you die. One of you will go like this, but it will be a similar story for the rest of you when your time has come. And there won't be any bells or choirs, no light at the end of the tunnel. There won't be any voice calling you home or crying ancestors welcoming you with open arms. I know because that's not what happened when I died. Your death is going to go like this. A week after Valentine's Day, you're going to be killed when a drunk driver T-bones your car at 65 miles per hour. You'll know that's how fast he was going, because you'll hear the police reading his broken speedometer after they pronounced you dead. There will be a shard of glass that went straight through your right eye and out the back of your head. Contrary to most people's opinion, discovering you are dead won't be as traumatic as you might expect. It turns out being disconnected from endorphins and adrenaline and surging blood pressure and all that messy biological stuff makes everything quite calm. But you won't feel dead. You'll feel hollow. It's like you're sitting alone in a dark theater, watching a movie of your own death. And the more time that passes, the dimmer and quieter the movie will become. I don't know if you will die right on impact, or whether this is the distorted senses of your oxygen-deprived brain as you bleed out on the ground. I just know that pretty soon it will be dark and peaceful and quiet, and you'll probably be okay if that was the end. But it won't be the end, and you won't be alone. When all the light is gone, there will be something moving in the darkness around you. You'll have no body or voice to scream with. You'll just be a single thought, being pressed in on all sides by the suffocating presence of something that's been waiting for you your entire life. Oh, and here's a fun fact to look forward to. It turns out pain is more than a firing neuron, it's an integral part of the conscious experience. And even when your body is gone, the consciousness that remains will still feel pain. The presence around you will crush you into oblivion until the pain becomes so intense you can't even think. You'll just have to wait for this part to be over. And you're going to be waiting a long while, because the perception of time is something you'll have left behind. This pain is all there is, all there ever was, and all there ever will be. Because somewhere in the beginning that which existed was separated from that which does not, and the void has never forgiven you for leaving it behind. But when it does end, and it will, because I'm here now, you're going to be asked a question. And you better be ready for it, because if you don't answer, the eternity is going to begin again. Just one question that determines whether or not this will ever end. And if you answer right, you'll get to go again. And you might even remember some of it like I did. And if you answer wrong, then nothing good you've ever done will spare you what's coming. And the question is, will you bring more people to take your place? And I said yes. And I have. And I'm not done yet. Next story. The confession. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. But even if He in all His glory finds the power to forgive me, how can I ever forgive myself? I'm often asked how I bear the burden of listening to confessions. People assume my conscience is haunted by the personal demons each man and woman struggles against, but that is not the case. In truth, there is no thrill which compares to hearing a confession. The trust they are putting in me, the trust they are putting in God, is a beautiful moment to behold. They freely submit themselves to my power, begging for my absolution as though it were I who wielded God's wisdom to judge or forgive. But when it comes time to confess my own sins, I found I lacked the courage of my flock. I am more than a man to them, I am a symbol of the divine. To admit my own failings is to weaken their faith that the Lord may shelter them if their belief is true. Or perhaps that is just the excuse I give to protect my pride. All I know is that this demon is too great for me to contain on my own, so I am writing this to beg the forgiveness of strangers in the hope I too may find peace again. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. He came to me like all the others and sat down in the other side of box. His voice was strange to me, almost like a voicemail compared to a human speaking in person. Speak and you will be forgiven, my son. I usually go in expecting infidelity. That is the most common curse which gnaws at our hearts with guilty teeth. I have killed a man. A good man. A man of God. The thrill only increases with the magnitude of the sin. I do not know who he is, but he is already telling me something which would allow me to destroy his entire life. I breathe slowly through my nose so as not to let the excitement enter my voice. Why did you do such a thing? He was a murderer himself, and I was afraid he would kill again, he replied. Disappointing. When they have a reasonable excuse for their sin, they do not feel the same desperate need for my approval. I would have preferred he killed someone innocent. To take a life for any reason is a great crime against God, I replied. That seemed like what I was expected to say. Confession is not the time to remind them how much blood God had demanded over the years. It is not your place to judge them. And it is yours to judge me. There was accusation in that voice. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Did I know this man? Only God may pass judgment for such a sin. Then I won't waste my time with you. I heard his door open and then slam shut like a petulant child going to his room. What an unfulfilling sinner he was. The rush I usually felt was utterly absent. The next week, I heard the same voice on the other side of the box. Forgive me, Father, for I have killed another man. Was he a murderer too? Not yet, but he could have become one, the voice said. Infuriatingly familiar, perhaps he was a relative, or simply one of my regular congregation. All men have the capacity for evil. Does that give you a right to kill anyone? I asked. There was nothing as satisfying as leading them to condemn themselves. Finally I would hear the real confession I was waiting for. Yes. I could not have prepared myself for that answer. By the time I got home, I knew who he had killed. My father had been choked to death in his house last night. I still remember the first beating he gave me when I was 4 years old. The scars from the lashes on my back have never healed to this day. Lord knows I had thought about ending him myself 100 times, but actually hearing the news was unimaginably painful. The guilt of my own evil thoughts against him was almost enough for me to seek confession myself, but there was no sense dirtying my image when I had resisted my evil temptations. If anything, I was thankful to my father. I never would have joined the church if I wasn't trying to get away with him. His cruelty had paved the way for my mercy. I didn't anticipate the killer to ever return after how closely he struck me. He couldn't have expected my forgiveness after so personal an attack. A month passed and I had come to terms with my father's death when the voice spoke through the wooden grate again. Forgive me, Father, for I have killed another man. My breath caught short. My fists clenched. How dare he? He never received absolution for either of his previous visits. That's when it occurred to me. He wasn't here for absolution. He was here to taunt me. The death of my father, the manner he composed himself, the blasphemous disregard for my authority. This was all a personal attack. Why did you do such a thing? I forced one word to follow the other. I couldn't slow my breathing this time. I couldn't allow this monster to continue. Because he made a fool out of everything I believe in. That was exactly what he was doing though. That was proof, he was only here to torment me. I don't know what I have done to this man to deserve such abuse, but I am still a man with blood pounding in my veins. I was not going to idly take it any longer. Get out of here, I said. Both this church and heaven will be barred to you forever. You're a fraud, the voice said. You don't speak for God, hell, you probably don't even believe in him. You just get off on the power you feel from pretending. I'm warning you, I was shouting now. Or what? You'll send me to hell. I thought only God could judge me. I was shaking so bad I had to stand to expel some of the extra energy. I killed your father with my bare hands, and all you can do about it is preach something you don't even believe. You're pathetic. That was too far. I flung open my side of the confession booth and raced over to his. I threw the second door open with enough force to tear it off the hinges. As though his insults weren't enough, the man was wearing a rubber mask of Jesus. Take that damn mask off and leave, I shouted. I didn't give him time to respond though. I was already lunging at him, trying to pull the mask off. He fought back, his hands clasping around my throat. Those hands. The same hands which had choked the life out of my father. It was all a blur after that. I tried to pry them off, but the grip was too strong. It wasn't until I got my own hands around his neck that he began to lose hold. The thrill of confession, the power I held over people, it was nothing like this. There is no power over someone like having their neck in your hands. I finally understood why my father beat me. I never felt closer to the divine than that moment when this demon convulsed beneath my hands before finally falling limp. Finally. Now I could see who hated me so much that they would go to these extreme lengths to torment me. His cold dead hands, so alike my own, were helpless to prevent me pulling back his mask. I stared at my own dead face. Vomit coating the sides of my mask. My dead tongue lolling grotesquely from my mouth. That is how I came to terms with who I am. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I have killed a man of God. I have killed my father. I have killed the man who made a fool of everything I believe in. And I have never felt more alive. Next story. Children Collector. Do you know this game? It's my favorite. All you have to do is lie very quietly, that's it, just like you were made of stone. Don't blink. Don't even breathe. And whatever you do, don't tell them. You're playing a game. They'll want to play with you, but you mustn't let them. Because when they join in, it won't be a game anymore. Every year I visit my father's grave in the veterans cemetery. He was a war hero, or so I was told. He died when I was 5, so I hardly even remember him. I'm not even going for sentimental reasons, I just like having a quiet place away from the world where I can put everything in perspective. Last weekend I knelt to place flowers there and open my mind to the clear air. I was alone except for 2 young girls, couldn't have been more than 10, visiting the adjacent grave. I heard them talking softly with some lady, but I didn't really pay any attention. I was here for me. Yes, dealing with car insurance or taxes is exhausting. But compared to him dying for our country, how could I allow myself to become frustrated with the minor annoyances of my daily life? I found resolve in the stillness of the dead air, and each time I left I would be ready to face each new challenge life had to offer. I didn't notice until I started down the hill that the 2 children were leaving alone. Who could they have been talking to? I mean, it was an open grassy hill, it's not like the lady with them could have just vanished. But then I heard the voice again, like a middle-aged woman whispering from a long way away. I walked over to the grave they had been sitting by and felt the gusty rustle of the words through the grass around me. It was getting stronger, and I swear it was coming straight from the ground. Bring me my children. I miss my children. The gravestone said Dori Malthusa. I couldn't tell you what else the voice said, because I got the hell out of there. And yeah, I laughed at myself for being freaked, but there wasn't anyone else around to impress by acting brave. A girl has got to take care of herself, you know. Well, maybe it was a trick, or my imagination, or the kids buried a walkie-talkie as a joke. I'd forgotten about it until that night when I turned on the evening news. 2 girls, ages 9 and 11, were found dead in the same cemetery. Their throats were cut from the front. The police say it must have been from someone they know, because there were no signs of a struggle. Their names were Rachel and Elizabeth Malthusa. I'm going back to the cemetery this weekend. If the voice talks to me, I'm going to answer it this time. And if it doesn't, if this is all just my mind playing tricks on me, then I could still use a little more tranquility after that unsettling experience. I returned to the grave of Dori Malthusa yesterday morning. Beats going at night at least, right? The freshly dug graves of her children were keeping her company now. It still seemed ludicrous that she somehow killed them, but I knew I would rest easier knowing they were at peace. Hello, Dori. I felt like an idiot talking to a grave. And in the quiet of the cemetery, I felt even stupider expecting a response. This was all nonsense. I must have just been so emotional from sitting beside my father's grave that I imagined her voice before. But I came all the way here, wasting my Sunday off when I could have been sleeping in or catching up on Game of Thrones, so here goes. You need to let your regrets go, Dory. I'm sorry you miss your children, but you can't force them to be with you. If you really loved them, you would want them to be at peace. There's nothing left to keep you here, so it's time for you and your children to rest. I held my breath. The wind rushed through the grass on the hill like a crashing wave. It whistled between the bare headstones. I guess that was what peace was supposed to sound like. The wind died down as I stood to leave, but the sound of the whistling didn't cease. I don't know where it was coming from, but it almost sounded like a giggling child. But we don't want to rest. We want to play. It was unmistakable this time. The voice of a little girl. I stood frozen in place. Playing sounded innocent enough, at least. Then you shall play, little darlings. I will give you everything you ever wanted, my beautiful children. It was Dory's voice this time, the same one I heard during my last visit. There's no one to play with, I replied. Go to sleep. The wind was picking up again, and I pulled my shawl tighter against the sharp tongues of the morning air. We want someone to play with. Another voice from another little girl. Can't we go to school anymore, Mom? No, and it is my fault for taking you away, she replied. I'm such a wicked, selfish mother. But I will make it right again. I will bring you all the children from your class, and you can stay with me forever and never be lonely. Bring the children? That could only mean one thing. She brought her own children to her by slitting their throats. I had to do something. I had to warn them, or their parents, or hell I don't know. I had to tell someone. The other children don't want to play, is all I could think of. Shit, I wish I'd said something better now. There weren't any more words that time. Just the giggling wind which whistled through the headstones. I couldn't just wait for children to start disappearing. I also couldn't imagine the police taking my lead as exactly credible. I considered going to my local church, but there has already been an awful scandal going around there, so I thought it best to not get tangled up. If I was going to do this, it was going to be on my own. After a little research, I was able to pull up the children's obituaries and found the address they used to live. That allowed me to Google the school districts and trace which elementary school the girls had gone to. That's good. That's a start. Now I just had to warn the Tobias Wade, 143 children somehow. A crazy stranger ranting about ghosts threatening their kids though, that sounds pretty sketchy. I know wouldn't let someone like me near kids. The only thing I could think to do was infiltrate the school and wait for something to happen. I don't have any kids of my own, thank God, but I tried calling about signing up as a substitute teacher. They said I needed to pass a class and gain a teaching certificate for that, but I didn't know how much time I had before the Malthusa girls wanted company. I agreed to set up the certificate training and managed to get myself invited down to the school for an interview. Mrs. Neggles, the home teacher, is the sweetest old thing I've ever seen. Imagine a sugar plum in a home-knitted sweater. She'd been in remission for 4 years, but lately, her doctors have suspected her breast cancer might be coming back. She anticipated needing to miss quite a few classes for the testing and was so happy I was there that she brought me straight into the classroom to meet her children. I had to buy as much time as I could. I don't know when they will strike, if they'll strike at all, but it seemed like Dory killed her children the same day she was speaking with them. If she was going to try and collect the rest of the class, then it would have to be during school hours. I made up every excuse I could to stay. I sang with the children in their music class, and volunteered to supervise recess. I helped the cafeteria lady prepare lunch and even picked up trash with the janitor. By the afternoon, it was clear that they were trying to get rid of me, but there was still no sign of the ghosts. I was sitting in the art room when Mrs. Neggles finally asked me to leave. The children were just filing into the room from their math class. I immediately volunteered to help them painting their wall, but they already had a guest artist who was going to help out. It was getting late though, maybe they would be all right until tomorrow. I started packing up my things, and that's when I heard the Malthusa girls. "Come and play with us." The voice was coming through the air conditioning vent. It was as soft as death which visits in a deep sleep. "That'll be all. We can take it from here. You may go now." Mrs. Neggles was using her stern voice, the one which made children with the attention span of a rabid squirrel jump into line with military precision. I walked as slowly as I could for the door, desperately looking for any excuse to stay. "Can we paint the wall too, Mommy?" "Of course you can, my darling. What colors do you think will go there?" Yellow. And orange. Like leaves. There." A can of paint sitting on the edge of Mrs. Neggles' desk. I gathered my purse, swinging it carelessly behind me. "Watch out." Mrs. Neggles was too slow. I hit the can hard, sending it spinning across the room to burst against the far wall. Red paint exploded all over the carpet, and the shrieks and giggles from the children drowned out the whispering voices. "I'm so sorry," I said. "Here, let me help." "You've done quite enough, thank you," Mrs. Neggles snapped. "Don't step in it now, hey. Stop that." The children were running wild. Shrieking, laughing, red footprints everywhere. Red hands on the walls. If one of them was cut right now, would I even notice? I had to get them out of here. "Let me at least watch them outside to give you space to clean up," I said. "Fine, just go. Get everybody out. Do you know this game? It's my favorite." We were all sitting in the recess yard. I managed to get them all sitting down in a circle around me, but I was at my wit's end. I don't know how to keep them safe. "I want to paint more, Mommy." The voice was getting louder. The kids were looking in all directions, trying to find where it was coming from. "Who said that?" one asked. "Please, children. Please listen to me. We're going to play a game. All you have to do is lie very quietly, that's it, just like you were made of stone. I'm going to paint something for you now. It's going to be bright red. Even brighter than the paint. Don't even blink. Don't even breathe. And whatever you do, don't tell them you're playing a game." The children were all lying down. Their eyes were closed. At least if they were to die now, they wouldn't see it coming. "I want to paint with them." "Why aren't they painting?" "They'll want to play with you, but you mustn't let them." I was on the verge of tears. But I couldn't break down, or the children would know it wasn't a game. And if it wasn't a game to them, they would begin to cry too. And if they cried, "Mommy, make them paint with us." Not a word. Not a sound. Still as stone. I held my breath. The children were all quiet. There was nothing left I could do. "They're boring. Mommy, make them stop being boring. Play. Play with my children." A few eyes opened to peek for the voice. A few hands began to rub the drying paint on their skin. Still as stone. "First one to move is out," I said. The hands stopped moving. "Mommy, this is stupid. Let's go back to the park." "Don't you want your class to come with you?" "No, they're all boring. Let's go see the ducks." "Of course, my darling. Let us go watch the ducks together. I'm a full-time teacher at the school now." I haven't heard the voices again since that time, but I don't feel right leaving the children alone. If the Malthusa girls ever do get lonely and decide to come back, I'm going to be here ready to play a game. It's very easy to play. All you have to do is lie very quietly, just like you were made of stone. Next story. Mother is back. Love is blind, and so is hope. But something doesn't become true just because you want it badly enough. I don't know why IT is in my house, but I'm not going to be fooled. I say IT because she isn't my mom. She looks like her, and talks like her, and smiles like her, but it isn't her. The worst part is, Dad doesn't even notice. I saw them dancing in the kitchen when I got home from school. Frank Sinatra was playing on the stereo, his smooth voice propelling their tangled bodies in a slow waltz across the room. My dad's eyes were closed as his head rested on it's shoulder, and he seemed genuinely happy, happier than I've seen him in a long time. I just dropped my backpack and stared. It let go of my father and hugged me. I stood stiff as a board. Mom never used to hug me when I got home, she knew I liked having my space. But there's no denying how soft and warm she felt, or the lavender odor of her shampoo washing over me. We're having homemade pizza with the cheese baked into the crust, my dad's favorite thing in the world. And seeing him so happy, I didn't have the heart to say anything. I just went to my room like a coward. I just pretended everything was fine. Maybe if I wasn't a little happy to see her too, I would have fought against it harder. It's been hard for all of us since Mom died, but that was no excuse to let it into our house, just so we could pretend we were a family again. But Mom, my real Mom, would put me to bed without staying to watch me fall asleep. She would hold on to my dad's arm when he talked, but she wouldn't dig her nails in so deeply they drew blood. She wouldn't forget to blink for hours at a time. 2 days have passed. I've been struggling to decide what to do. No, that's not quite true. I know what needs to be done, but it would be so much easier to just keep pretending like my dad. Maybe in time I would even forget that a drunk driver T-boned my mom's SUV while she and my dad were coming home from their date. I'd forget the bloodstains on the asphalt and the hours I spent waiting for her in the emergency room. Maybe I'd even forget how it felt when she didn't come out. Then again, maybe those are the memories that aren't real. They certainly don't feel real when my mother, it, sits between us on the sofa to watch the evening news. But letting her be replaced, even if it was easier for Dad and me, wasn't any way to respect my real mom. It was for her, not for me, that made me finally speak up. Dad, we need to talk about Mom. I'd waited until it went to the bathroom, which doesn't happen nearly as often as it used to corner my dad in his bedroom. He just kept reading, not even returning my gaze. He knew what I was going to say, he just didn't want to hear it. Do you remember what happened last month when she was in that accident? It's getting late. You should go to bed so you'll be ready for school tomorrow, Dad said. Dad, this is serious. Please tell me that you remember. I heard a flush from the bathroom. There wasn't much time. I'd never get an answer out of Dad with it here. Dad was watching the bathroom door too, like a kid praying for the bell to ring before the teacher collected homework. The shower began to run, and I let out a deep breath I didn't even realize I was holding. Dad sighed too, there was no getting out of this. Yeah, I remember, he said. He stared back into my eyes. I finally had his attention. Do you remember the hospital? And what happened after? Yeah. It was a pretty bad crash. We're all so fortunate that nobody was hurt. His eyes were keen and sharp. He couldn't have forgotten, he was just trying to get me to accept it without having to admit it. For my real mom's sake though, it had to be said. She died, Dad. We went to her funeral. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He just smiled. Don't be ridiculous. She's in the bathroom right now. I ran over to him and grabbed him by the shoulders. I shook him, but he didn't fight it. He just kept staring at me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. You're lying. You know what happened, I know what happened. Why are you lying to me? Aren't you happier this way? He asked. If you think about what happened, really think about it, you'll realize this is the best thing for you. There. That was proof. He wasn't trying to evade anymore. He wasn't even averting his eyes in denial. The shower stopped running, but he kept his eyes on me. That's when I realized I couldn't remember the last time I saw him blink. Dad had been in the accident too, why hadn't I wondered why he came out unharmed? I'd been so busy mourning Mom that I hadn't even stopped to think. He must have seen it in my face, because his smile stretched wider. Now you understand. But you mustn't let Mother know that I told you. She wants to have a family so badly. I'd hate to think what she would do if she found out you didn't think of her that way. The bathroom door opened. It stood there, wrapped in a towel. She walked nonchalantly over to my dad, or who I thought was my dad, and gave him a kiss. They both turned to look at me. "What are you still doing awake?" my other mother asked. "Is everything all right?" "He was just going to bed," my other dad said. "Everything is fine, isn't it?" I nodded. "Come, let me tuck you in." My other mother started moving toward me, but she stopped when she saw me flinch. "Let your mother tuck you in." My other dad's voice was tense with an unspoken threat. Perfect parents like us deserve to have the perfect son. I hope we won't need to replace him. He laughed at his own joke, and she put her hand on his arm as she laughed with him. I turned around and headed for my room so I wouldn't have to see the blood dripping down his arm. Next story. Post office worker. I want to share some of the creepy things I find being mailed through the U.S. Post Office. And if you think we don't look, yeah, we do. If we have any grounds for suspicion, we can run a package through scanners without even having to fill out a form. Then if we see something in the X-ray which might contain something illegal or a safety hazard, we're allowed to open it. And yeah, pretty much anything can look like something illegal if you put your mind to it. But that doesn't stop people from still sending the weirdest shit. They count on the volume of packages being way too high to inspect each one, and usually they're right. Here are a few times they were wrong. A human finger. It still had its wedding ring on. I guess one lady didn't think divorce papers would send a strong enough message, so she sent her whole finger. At least, that's what I'm assuming it meant. Blackmail letters. We got a string of letters headed to the same destination, all without a return address. Inside were pictures of a politician, sorry not saying who, naked in a hotel room with a girl 20 years younger than him, threatening him if he doesn't cough up. Drugs. You have no idea how many people are using dark web websites to send drugs. If they're packaged right, it's pretty impossible to tell, but others are sloppy. A coffee can full of marijuana, which I could smell from a room away, a syringe full of heroin with a handwritten label reading insulin, LOL, cocaine in a sugar bag, you name it. The weirdest thing I've ever found was what came in 2 weeks ago though, and it's why I'm writing this post now. Real ordinary envelope with red lettering mixed in with a bag of other ordinary letters. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't watched the guy drop it into the box a minute before I collected. He was wearing these old-fashioned monk robes like you'd expect to see in a medieval monastery. I forgot about him until I was unpacking the bag at the office and I saw the red lettering. The address was starting to smear, and there was no mistaking, it was written in fresh blood. If that doesn't count as grounds for suspicion, I don't know what does. I opened it to find a list of 12 names, also written in blood. The first 4 were crossed out. At the bottom of the list it said, "Give me 6 months for the rest. Destroy the letter, and do not tell anyone." I tried Googling the names, and over the last 3 months, all 4 had committed suicide. I forwarded the information to the police and they said they would investigate, looking for any connection with the remaining 8 people. There was another letter from him, collected from the same box last week. It was the same list, but this time there were 5 names crossed off. I googled the 5th name and you guessed it, suicide 2 days ago. Almost the same list anyway. My name was added to the bottom. At the end of the list was written, "I told you not to tell anyone. Do not try to find me." Well, I didn't have to find him, because I knew where he was dropping the letters off. If I could just explain to him I wasn't a threat, if I promised to not tell anything more, then maybe he'd take my name off. The police weren't finding anything, and I couldn't think of any other way to protect myself. Yesterday I waited at the same mailbox he dropped off at. Right on schedule, same time he dropped the other letters, the cloaked figure was there. He was walking strangely though, like he could barely move his legs. He was struggling to even lift the letter up to the mailbox. I confronted him and begged him to take my name off the list. I swore I would stay out of his business. I didn't even care if the others died, I just didn't want to be one of them. He didn't answer me though. The figure seemed to be struggling under his cloak, and then he was the one to drop to his knees in front of me. Why would he be begging from me? Was he afraid I'd turn him in? When he still didn't answer, I pulled the cloak back to reveal his face. His mouth was gagged. I helped him out of the cloak and found his legs and arms were tied too. No wonder he was having trouble getting the letter in the box. Who did this to you? What's going on? I asked him. He opened the letter and crossed out a name. Was that it? Was I off the list? I took a step closer to see, but then he pulled out a handgun, right in front of me. Holy shit, I backed up so fast I fell right on my ass. But he wasn't pointing it at me. He was pointing it at himself. One shot. Straight to the temple. He was dead before he hit the ground. You might think I'm an asshole for this, but even before calling the police, I went for the letter. All I cared about was that my name was taken off. But he hadn't crossed out my name, he'd crossed out the 6th name on the list. I checked it against his driver license and yeah, same name. Not only that, but my name had been moved. I'm now number 7, the next one up. Written below the list, it said, I told you not to try and find me. Next story. Who wrote the suicide note? Don't stick your dick in crazy. Words to live by. It's amazing how our mind can rationalize anything when we want something, or someone, badly enough though. When we first started dating, I didn't think Emma was crazy. Well, that's not entirely true, but somehow I thought crazy was a good thing. Riding shopping carts down hills, holding a conversation with a dozen different voices, singing in public without a care in the world. She was innocent and free and wild, and I loved her for it. Every fun, spontaneous thing that came into her mind, we did together. She forced me to open up as an individual and tore down walls and inhibitions I didn't even know I had. There were warning signs for the other kind of crazy too, but I just thought it was all an act. I didn't think she was really hearing voices, and even if she was, what was the harm in it? She never acted out bizarre commands or anything. It was just part of what made her unique. When she gave birth to our daughter Anastasia, I began to take her mental health a little more seriously. Emma was having visual as well as auditory hallucinations now, and she would get angry at me if I ever dismissed them as not being real. We talked through it and did some research, and it sounded to me like she had schizophrenia. She always thought her voices were from a guardian angel, and I knew she wasn't going to be happy hearing otherwise. I had to get her to recognize they weren't real though, otherwise she would just encourage our daughter to believe in that stuff. Anastasia would already be genetically predisposed to her own hallucinations, and I didn't want that mentality to be reinforced. That was the worst fight Emma and I ever had. I didn't realize exactly how real it all was to her until I pushed her to get help. She wouldn't talk to me afterward for days, and even when she started to again, she would reference her guardian angel constantly. Ezekiel, her angel, reminded me to pick up milk at the store or let's go see the new Star Wars movie. Ezekiel said it was good. It only got worse as the years went on. By the time Anastasia was 9 years old, her mother and I couldn't even be in the same room together. Then one night my daughter was having nightmares, and instead of comforting her, I caught Emma telling Anastasia that she should be afraid. That she should run from it, for God's sake. That was too much for me. We had a big fight right there in our daughter's room, screaming, cursing, throwing pillows, the whole bit. I wasn't going to let my daughter turn out to be like her, so there was no choice but to file for a divorce. I had recordings of her being crazy, and I would get custody of the kid. It wasn't going to be pretty, but that's how it had to be. I tried to talk to Anastasia about it, but she was so upset from watching our fight she couldn't deal with it. That night, I found a note in my daughter's room while putting her to sleep. I saw pictures of Mommy and Daddy when they first met. They went on adventures. They smiled a lot. Then there are pictures of them after I was born. They aren't smiling anymore. I'm sorry I did that to you. I hope you'll feel better when I'm gone. I love you, Mommy. I love you, Daddy. Goodbye. That was it. I asked Anastasia what it was and she shrugged. I got angry, I shouldn't have, but I was scared, and I yelled at her. She promised she didn't write the letter, and I calmed down. Yelling will only make things worse. I promised nothing that was happening was her fault, and that she should never do anything bad to herself. She still insisted she hadn't written it though. That's when it clicked. The manipulative bitch. Emma wrote a fake suicide note just so I would feel bad and we would stay together. This was the last straw. That demon was not spending another night in my house. I ran to our bedroom and pounded on the door. Emma was in there, reading a book with a mask of innocence on her face. How I hated that innocence, she wore it like an excuse for nothing being her fault. I screamed at her and shoved the letter in her face. She screamed back. It was about 5 minutes before either of us could understand what the other was saying. Finally a string of clear words punctured through the violent words. I didn't write it. I swear on Ezekiel, I didn't. We both stared at each other in silence as the awful realization dawned on us. If she hadn't written it then, we both raced to our daughter's room, shoving each other out of the way as we went. The door was locked. Anastasia. Are you in there? Silence. I rammed my shoulder against the door. It's all right, sweetie, Emma cooed. Everything is all right. We love you, and we love each other. I glared at Emma, but she shrugged. She was right though. This wasn't about us. This was about our daughter. Your mother and I love each other, I added. I'm sorry we were fighting. Please open the door. Please, baby. You will both be happy again when she's gone. That wasn't my daughter's voice. It was deep and old, like a soldier who stared death in the face so many times it stopped fazing him. There was a man in my daughter's bedroom. Emma and I stared at each other. Her eyes were two quivering saucers. She turned back to the door. Don't do it, Ezekiel. You're my angel. You're supposed to protect us. No, the deep voice said. I'm supposed to protect you. And that's what I'm doing. Anastasia screamed. It couldn't have been anyone else. I hit the door so hard I could feel my shoulder dislocate. I didn't care. I hit again, and the door blew open. Anastasia was lying on her bed, a kitchen knife in her hands. The red circle of blood soaking into the bed was expanding with every second. There was no one else in the room. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was Emma playing a trick on me, maybe it was real. After our daughter died, Emma and I couldn't even look at each other anymore. She left that night, and I haven't seen or spoken to her since. I never heard the voice again either, but sometimes in the deep of night I'll ask it a single question: is Emma happy now? Next story. The psychedelic tattoo. 2 days ago I had the most exciting day of my life. I've heard that's pretty common when you try LSD for the first time, but this trip opened doors for me that will change me forever. I'm a 23-year-old girl and I call myself a freelance artist, but it's really just because that sounds better than unemployed. I'm sure a lot of you know how hard it is for independent illustrators out there. No matter how good you are, you're always going to see someone who is better and still can't make a career out of it. The other side of that coin is that no matter how bad you are, there's always going to be someone who has already made a fortune from being worse. It really just comes down to being in the right place and meeting the right people. Well, I live in New York, as good a place as you can find for the arts, but I've always been extremely introverted. Like if someone is knocking on my door, I'll lie really quietly on the ground and wait for them to go away. It's hard for me to go hang out with the people I do know. Attending the parties and social gatherings that are essential for making career-advancing connections is impossible. It's not like I don't have friends or anything. Well, okay, so I only have one friend, but that feels like more than enough. Anyway, my one friend Jordan decided the best way to help me was for us to take LSD together and talk through my social aversion. I was hesitant at first. I'm pretty sure he has feelings for me, and I don't want something to happen and ruin my only friendship. Who knows though, maybe it would teach me to get close with another human being for once and something could work between us. Either way, I was desperate to change my life. I've heard some amazing stories about how psychedelics can open your mind and alter your perspective, and I ended up agreeing. Opening your mind is one way to describe it. Blowing a hole through one side and out the other to splatter on the far wall would be better. In the glorious moment of the peak of my high, I was completely invincible. My art was divinely inspired, my personality infectious and debonair, and my future success inevitable. Between my magnetic confidence and Jordan tripping out of his mind, we decided it would be a good idea for me to give him a tattoo. If you're cringing right now, I get it. To a sober person, it sounds like a terrible idea. But I was swimming through an ocean of color and the muse was singing softly in my ear. The needle of the tattoo gun danced an intricate ballet across his back which wasn't so much seen as experienced in its own dimension. I was the ink in his skin, pulling veins of light straight from the air to imbue into my creation. Not to brag, but I've been drawing my whole life and I'm pretty damn good, but this was the first piece of art which has ever come alive for me. Once the LSD had worn out of our systems, we admired it again and holy shit. Jordan was wearing a picture of the infinite cosmos being condensed into the soul of a solitary human, interwoven with such sublime color and beauty that I felt the two were inseparable and the same. Even sober, neither of us could look upon the masterpiece on his skin without tears in our eyes. The trip did something strange to me though. I was so hyper-focused on my career that I couldn't think of anything else. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and most of all couldn't go out and meet people like I was supposed to. I was just obsessively trying to draw the tattoo over and over again, but every time it would look like a cheap, broken doll trying in vain to imitate that living masterpiece. I ran out of paper, but I didn't want to leave to get more, so I just kept drawing on every surface around me. The walls, the counters, even an entire roll of toilet paper was unraveled across the floor to make space for my doodles. It was so frustrating I wanted to die. I needed that feeling of progress to keep me sane while approaching this impossible dream. Failing to replicate what I had already done just felt like a huge step back. I was crying when Jordan came back to visit that night. The best thing I could ever do was already done, and I would never become a real artist. I was going to end up some crack whore in a back alley somewhere, desperately trying to get any fix which would bring me closer to that perfect creation which I could never approach while sober. Don't worry though, this story has a happy ending. Even if I couldn't force myself to go out, Jordan was a social butterfly. He had been showing off my tattoo all day long, and he had some big news for me. Andrew Krebs. The manager at Andrew. Fucking. Krebs, one of New York's, the world's most renowned art galleries, had seen my tattoo. Even crazier, one of his exhibits, Roe Etheridge, was just cancelled due to some licensing issue and he desperately needed a new piece by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. But how in the world was I going to have something ready by then? He'd seen the best I can do, and nothing else in my portfolio even came close. If I tried to bring my old stacks of watercolors and crumpled canvas to Andrew Krebs, I'd get laughed out the door. But I was this close, and I wasn't going to give up now. Jordan was so amazing for having gotten me in the door. He had always been so good to me. The least I could do, the only thing I could do, to thank him was sex. But it wasn't about our friendship, or his feelings. It was about my art, it had always been about my art. I waited until he fell asleep, nuzzled against my bare body, when I gave him the only thing I had to give. I slipped out of bed without waking him. That's good. After all he's done, I wouldn't want him to be awake for this part. It's amazing how easily box cutters can part the skin. It almost felt like painting as his blood drained from the hole I cut in his neck. It was fitting for him to go this way since he was my masterpiece. Cutting the tattoo off his back was a little messier than I expected, but that was just because I cut deeper than I really needed to. I couldn't take the risk of damaging the tattoo. Tomorrow morning I'm going down to the gallery with my pride. Thank you, Jordan. You're the best friend a girl could ask for.